Hi, it's Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and welcome back to my channel where I make a lot of cake and cookie decorating tutorials as well as give a lot of baking business tips. So this is a really exciting video for me to make. This is where I was actually making the cake for Brandcast. So if you don't know what Brandcast is, it's basically a huge YouTube event where a lot of brands are invited and they get to hear all about how amazing all of us creators are on the platform, and this one was specifically for YouTube Canada. So I felt very, very proud to represent YouTube Canada, and I felt really proud to represent the food and dessert community there as well. Now you might notice that this video is a little bit longer than my usual tutorials. That's because I am going to be telling you what it is that I'm doing. I'm also going to be telling you little things here and there regarding YouTube Brandcast and my trip as a whole. So in the past decade, Toronto really isn't a place that I frequent. I find that I actually don't visit a lot of the provinces here in Canada. I mainly stick to Vancouver, and if I travel, I often end up going to the States or maybe somewhere else. So this was really a big opportunity for me to try and get as much done as I possibly could. And I knew that since I was coming to Toronto, that I wanted to collaborate with Joey the Caking Girl. Now, Joey is an accomplished cake decorator herself. Be sure to go and check her out on Instagram. However, if you have been on any platforms that share a lot about food and dessert making or just extraordinary people, then you've probably heard of her daughter Ellis, who's only 4 years old, who decorates these amazing cakes, which you can also see on Joey's Instagram. So for sure, this mom is amazing, and she's a fantastic cake decorator in her own right, as I previously mentioned. Now, Joey and I met online maybe about a year ago when I really didn't have that much of a big following on YouTube or Instagram, and Joey reached out to me and we just got to chatting, and I said, one day when I'm in the Toronto area, or if you're in the Vancouver area, I would love to collaborate. And I can't believe that that day actually came up a lot faster than I originally thought when I said that. You know, when people say those types of things, but you're really never sure if it's actually going to come to fruition. Well, I'm a make it happen type person, and I'm so glad that she came with me on this journey because this was such an exciting time. Now let's talk about how I actually got to this point with all of these materials in this finishing kitchen. Yes, you heard me right. This is a finishing kitchen, which means it doesn't have all of the usual supplies of a full commercial kitchen. Well, I brought forth the idea to Brandcast that I really wanted to create a display cake because, as you guys know, my channel is primarily based on cookie and cake decorating. So I knew I had to have something like that, and it was pretty improbable that I would be able to make a real cake for this event. There just was a really tight timeline. Plus, like I said, this was not a full kitchen. So we decided to go with a display cake. And once I decided that I wanted to do a display cake, I said, you know, how am I supposed to get all the supplies there? It's going to be a lot to pack, and the YouTube team took care of me. I listed everything that I would possibly need, and they got all of the items on my list, which I was just so impressed with. I got to request all of my favorite brands. I love that I was able to reach out to smaller companies and offer them so much business because we needed a lot of supplies for a lot of other things that I'm going to be sharing in another video. So it was just so fantastic to be able to support those brands. Now, I did anticipate that it was going to be small, but I just didn't know how small in the kitchen. I was just glad that I didn't decide to go with a 12-inch round on the bottom because I don't think I would have been able to roll out the fondant big enough for me to be able to actually cover these tiers. When planning this whole project with my team, we more so talked about height than we did about width. This is because we knew we were going to place this cake in a pretend display fridge. So I needed to make sure that it had enough height so that it would pop. And I really didn't know how much depth the cupboard would actually have, so I decided to focus more on the height. Later on, I did receive all of the very specific measurements for all of these things. It was very particular, something I'm not used to because I feel like I eyeball a lot of things, and it ended up turning out really well. I think we could have even gone maybe a little bit higher with the cake. Now, I am a planner and an organizer through and through, but leading up to this event, there was no particular inspiration that was hitting me with this cake. So Joey and I kind of had a brief discussion about what it is that we wanted to do, but we actually ended up changing it later on. I needed it to be a cake that was very representative of my videos and was representative of me as a cake and cookie decorator. So I decided in the end that I wanted to make sure that this whole cake was white and pink. Oh, and of course we can't forget about that gold. And it was Joey's idea to add me on top, which I absolutely loved. Now, normally I feel very stressed about these types of things. I mean, when you're under pressure and you need to get something done in a particular time, that can be stressful. However, I feel like because we had all day and we also had two people working on something instead of just myself, I really felt like that took a lot of the pressure off and we were able to switch up whatever it is that we wanted to do. The YouTube team really gave me creative freedom when it came to all of the desserts. So while Joey was working on all of these fine details, I was pretty much making sure that the cake was coming together. That was my biggest thing that I wanted out of the way. I just feel like once your cakes are stacked, you feel like you're a lot further along, even if it seems to take you way longer after that. To get all of the cakes stacked, what I had to do was I had to make sure that I filled in all of the gaps in the styrofoam with a bunch of shortening. I find that styrofoam cake tiers can sustain a lot of damage in transport, so if you ever have to do that, just make sure that you fill it in with shortening, kind of like you would fix a cake with buttercream, and then go ahead and place your fondant on as per usual. Now, in the original vision of this cake, I wanted to have a bunch of baked goods all over the cake, but then I decided to just keep things simpler and go with just macarons. You guys know how much I love macarons and I make them frequently on this channel, so I felt like that was more me. Also, a little side note, I never ever decorate with my ring on, obviously, because if I were making this for consumption, I wouldn't want anything to be caught in my ring and get on the food. But I really didn't want to leave it in the hotel and I wanted to have it on me, so it felt really strange wearing my ring. And yes, if you're wondering, there was a lot of cornstarch and other random things found in my ring later on, which I did have to thoroughly clean. So I don't often get to work with other cake decorators anymore. For the past couple years, it's been a lot of just me working by myself. And it was really, really fun collaborating on a cake together because things come together so much more quickly and everybody seems to use different techniques. For example, I've never really used a mold when it came to making legs and other limbs for characters, but they turned out so perfect and beautiful on the cake that I definitely feel like I need to go out and grab one of these. Now, my original vision for this entire video was I was going to let you just hear the ambient sounds that would be around us, but
Anything, or is it just going to be like you sit in?
No, you're just going to be like this.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have time to like dry your hands.
Yeah,
and everything.
center then.
So that's been nice.
yeah, and if you can believe it, that fan sound was actually a lot louder in person, and we heard it for about 12 hours straight. And as you can see, we've taken so long to decorate this cake that the kitchen staff is now coming in because they are preparing for dinner. So one of the really cool things about this was the whole day was catered and it was amazing. We didn't have to stop to go cook some food or try to pick some food up anywhere. We were completely pampered by the team and we were able to eat really just healthy and delicious dishes. It was fantastic and it really made the cake decorating experience even that much more pleasant. I know I've made a short video before and you guys have given me plenty of comments about how difficult it is to really get dinner together and on that table and really just eat any meals throughout the day when you're doing a full day of dessert decorating. So once again, a huge thank you to the YouTube team. All right, so as I was creating all of these little macarons, I developed a better system as we continued on. The first one, I felt like I created that in a really weird way, so you'll see later on in the video how I end up creating it later. We could have gotten a mold for it, but I just find that some of the macaron molds are a little bit ruffly on the edge, which my macarons don't tend to be very ruffly on the edge. It's more of like those high feet, so I really wanted to make sure that I was more in control. And sometimes when you're using a mold, you're not super in control of those finer details. Now, had we pre-planned a little bit better and knew exactly what we were doing, we probably would have made some of these bigger pieces like the fondant character, and maybe I might have made some florals beforehand. That really would have cut down on time, but I'm kind of glad that we left everything to this day because I wanted to make sure that we were capturing everything super authentically. And I really do not know when I'll ever have this opportunity again to decorate and do things in a kitchen that I don't normally ever work in, and I don't even know if I'll ever work in this kitchen again. So although I did feel very tired and my body was exhausted because of the height of the counters and how I had to keep bending down, I really was savoring every moment of being in here. Now, when I was actually in the moment, I didn't notice this, but after editing all of the footage, it really stood out to me. I mean, Joey's doing all of these really great things with the character. She's working on different elements, and I spent a vast majority of the time making all of those macarons. It really didn't feel like that much of a tedious task, but I definitely spent a lot longer on them than I originally thought. By the way, a huge shout out to my friend Andrea. We have been best friends since we were in preschool. She is the one that is doing all of the filming for me. I really did try to bring my tripod onto the plane, but unfortunately, I couldn't fit my tripod into my carry-on, and if I went any bigger with my luggage, then I wouldn't have been able to not check my baggage. I really did not want to have to check my baggage on the way to Toronto and on the way back. So that is why my friend really took one for the team. And at some points, she was simultaneously filming with my phone so that I could get all of my reels and my shorts in. And she was also filming with my camera. So huge shout out to her. Thank you very much for being such a good friend. Now here I am making a bow. And I gotta say, I've made a bow lots of times on my channel, but I think this is the clearest shot of me making a bow that I've ever seen, because normally my hands are covering things and I don't have somebody to film when I'm at home. So I hope that gave you a little bit more of a clearer visual of how I create that bow. Now, some people like to make their bows with 2 pieces of fondant, loop it together, and then stick it together. I always like to do it in one long ribbon because I just find that things hold together a lot more easily for me. Now, the one tool that I forgot to ask for that would have been very helpful was my pastry ribbon cutter. So the one that can cut multiple lines at once and make sure that everything is nice and even. So I do end up spending a lot of time later on really trying to get all of those kind of ribbon pieces nice and even. Also, I don't know if this is a thing, but I find that every time I work with a brand new steamer, it always seems to take forever for it to actually warm up. So I felt like there was a lot of moments where I was just holding it there. Mine at home really heats up quite quickly, and then it'll just keep steaming once it's steamed one time. So I was waiting around a little bit for that, but that was a very small portion. There was really not too much frustration with this cake because we could do so much of what we wanted to do, and any issues that we had, we could just either eliminate that element or we could back into it in a different way. Like when that polka dot fell out of my hand, it landed on a place that was perfectly fine with me. And yes, I did sit here creating these little polka dots. I always find when I do things like this, I refer to it as the Rachel way. If you guys watched my channel before, you know that Rachel is one of my caking besties, and she taught me a lot of these little tips and tricks. She's very big on not using a lot of cutters when she can kind of just do things a little bit more quickly without them. So I find whenever I do things without using cutters and instead just molding things with my fingers, I call it the Rachel way. I think adding the hair onto a character is one of my favorite parts of creating characters because you kind of know that you're nearing the end, especially when your character has nice long hair. It's really easy to cover up that flat head space, and it's also easy to cover up any other imperfections that may have occurred while you were creating the character. Now, like I mentioned, guys, in a previous video, I was not used to the humidity here. So although there was air conditioning in the facility, I still felt like that humidity had a little bit of an impact on what we were creating. So I did end up kind of over steaming the cake a little bit because I find where I'm from, when I steam the cake quite a bit, it really doesn't mess with it too much. But I definitely went a little overboard because I wasn't really sure how that humidity would impact it. So things were melting down a little bit with my bow, but it ended up working out. But note to self, steam a little bit less when I'm in Toronto. Now, when you're creating a display cake, I feel like it has a little bit of different rules than when you're actually creating a cake that's going to be consumed. I knew that this cake would never ever be seen from the back by anybody, no matter how hard they would try to see the back of the cake. So we decided to make sure that everything was really to the front of this cake. And you'll even notice that I didn't wrap this ribbon all the way around the cake because I knew that nobody would see it. And again, although we were having fun with this, we didn't want to waste unnecessary time. I mean, Joey did eventually have to go back home, and we definitely needed rest because the next day was actually the Brandcast event itself. So hands down, this was probably the most difficult task that I had to do, and that was put on my gold leaf. You guys know how much I love my beloved gold leaf, but what I'm not used to when applying gold leaf is a literal tornado in a kitchen. I'm just kidding. But you guys heard that fan earlier. That was not just for hearing purposes. It really was kind of windy inside of this kitchen, so the gold leaf was flying everywhere, and it made it really, really challenging to apply to the cake. Now, applying gold leaf to fondant is pretty straightforward. You just steam the fondant a little bit and then you place your gold leaf wherever you would like it. I mean, these sheets were pretty massive and I didn't have any chopsticks like I normally would use in my videos, but I did have a lot of other tools, so I tried to use those to the best of my ability. Now, at this point, what was happening was Joey was painting on these beautiful flowers. We had done the same painting on our cookies, which I will show you in another video, so we decided to make sure that those were on the cake somehow as well. And while she was doing that, I decided that it looked a little bit strange with just the gold on the top. Our original plan was actually to cover that whole tier in gold leaf, but of course we didn't have enough gold leaf, so we decided to just kind of ombre it up a little bit on that top tier and then add in these little bits and pieces on every single tier to really tie in the gold. And both Joey and I discussed that together, and it was actually her idea to just place little flakes here and there beside the macarons. Working with Joey was just so wonderful. She was so easygoing about everything, and I feel like we really vibed together when we created this cake. I mean, we'd never worked together before, and you never know how the chemistry of that is actually going to work out when you start doing these things. And I was so thrilled because everything just came together beautifully, and I feel like we both came up with something that we were both happy with. Now, this is the new method by the end of the macaron making session that I came up with. I just found it was way easier to squish things together, and it went a lot faster. And that way I could add all of those pokey little dots at the very end once that macaron was placed on. This was the end of our day. We had already decorated all of the cookies and we had finished decorating the cake. So we just had this really great moment. I felt so proud that this was finished and that we managed to accomplish this in such a different baking space. I feel like sometimes when you're not in your own space, things tend to go a little bit more wrong, but luckily it was fairly stress-free. Fun fact about this shot, I actually had to wait for a whole marching band to pass before I was able to come through and get this into the space that it needed to go to. It's probably the most stressful part because of course you don't want to drop it. Now let's get into the subscriber submission of the video. This one is sent in to me by a very dear subscriber. She is such a supportive subscriber, and this was fully made with whipped cream apparently, which I am super impressed with. And if you want to be the next subscriber submission of the video, then please follow me at SD Bake Shop on Instagram, where you can either tag me in a photo or send me a photo. Any and all dessert levels are welcome. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading weekly, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye! And a huge thanks to Joey the Caking Girl for joining me for today's video.